What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Bioware and this EA buyout fallout. A lot of words there, but look, this is something we talked about literally less than 24 hours ago. I think I made a video on Podcast Now earlier this morning talking about games and studios that I'm worried about, from this EA thing that was happening, over the last day. Now, look, it doesn't go through, I think, officially until April of next year, so there is a little bit of time, and I don't think, honestly, any cuts, any, massive thing, I don't think happens now. I really think it happens around April, or maybe it even happens a couple months after. That's kind of the pattern we've seen. Even, you look at when Microsoft buys, and they kind of do like yearly, where they lay off thousands of people. So, oftentimes it kind of happens afterwards, to be honest with you. So, I talked about Respawn and the Jedi games. I talked about a couple different studios, Sims, like what do they do with the Sims? But also, one of the big focuses of the video earlier today was Bioware. Well, I made that video. I actually made it last night. And then today, there's an Insider Gaming article that literally is about Bioware staff is worried about the studio's future. And look, it just seems like a couple people reached out, right? You got a couple of one-liners, nothing too crazy, but, it tells us, I think, how they're feeling. And it's not surprising. That's definitely something I want to talk about later on in this video. So they say, look at the negativity that came after Dragon Age. If we felt it was only going to get worse then, you can imagine what some of us think now. Then they talk about people kind of getting ready to leave and just get a new job. The one said, I've been doing it since last year, but I'm making sure I have a portfolio ready and feelers out for other jobs. Kind of feels like a matter of time. Insider Gaming talks about, it used to be a staff of over 200. Now it's less than 100. So it got, halved really the studio. And then another quote that says, in terms of Mass Effect, we're going to keep working on it until they tell us we're done. It's not the healthiest way to live, but as long as the paychecks keep coming, we're not just going to walk away. And one thing I will throw out there is, well, no duh. You don't really have the right to do that. Look, you're an employee, you can choose to leave. I'm not saying like you're forced to slavery there, but if you're there, you are working on Mass Effect and you don't really have a choice. It's a weird comment, right? Like, as long as the money keeps coming in, like, we're not going to stop. Well, what did you think you were going to do? You're told what to do, so it's like, I don't really think you have that much of a say unless, of course, you leave the company, which, as the earlier quotes suggest, some people might be looking to do. All right, here's the deal. And this is tough because I want to word things right, because sometimes things can get lost, especially, you're not seeing my face. Maybe you can't tell my expressions. Okay, I don't want people losing their jobs. I think I've made that crystal clear really over the last 3-4 years, as thousands of people have lost their jobs, okay? I don't want people losing their jobs. I don't want people homeless. I want people fed. I want people okay. It's a sad and scary world sometimes that we live in. I just want people to be okay. I want accountability for people in the gaming industry, and I also can believe in redemption stories or second chances. I say all of that because of what I'm about to say, right? So BioWare's worried about its future. That should not even be a story. And I say that, you might say, well, what do you mean by that? What I mean is, this is something that they should have been concerned about the last 10 years. Now, I understand people come and go, and the people that are there now, how many were around 7-8 years ago? How many were around, to be honest with you, even just a little while ago? We know that they, again, kind of contracted, right? Let people go. But then they have that Mass Effect team, and they've been slowly building it as time has gone up. So, to be honest with you, there are people probably working on that Mass Effect game that have been there less than a year. They weren't even there for Dragon Age the Veilguard, okay? And that's important to remember, because you say the word BioWare and like, well, what does that mean? Well, number one, it means a shell of its former self. Like, it's not what you think of when you think of like the Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, Dragon Age 1 and 2. That's not like what I'm talking about, when I say BioWare. Yeah, you think about, the properties and all that stuff, but you got to think about the people there now, okay? So, but again, going back to that point, like, this is something that they kind of have coming. And I don't say that, like, it might sound aggressive. And I think when a lot of people talk about it, and look, to be honest with you, if they are shut down, I think people will have similar things to say, where it's like, it's not, I don't think, it's not evil to talk about or to say, Like, well, what did you think was going to happen? And I say that with respect because I say that wanting a rebound. I say that wanting them to have that second chance. But you also have to look at it, I think, very practically. And maybe it's easier because I'm not there, like I'm not living in it. So it's a different way of looking at it. Okay, granted. But truthfully, you look at this situation, you look at Bioware in the last 10 years, and how in God's name are they still around in the first place? Now, I'm not saying that as in, like, close them yesterday, but I'm saying, like, well, you're worried about it now that that EA did this whole thing, and I'm not saying it's a phenomenal thing that EA just pulled off. I mean, I think it probably is going to do more harm than good, as we'll see in the next couple of years, but we'll see, right? But if you're Bioware and you're saying, okay, now's the time to hit the panic button, especially people, and I guess I'm really only talking about people that have been there for a long time. People that have contributed to this. I guess I'm not talking about, Joe Schmo that just came in 5 months ago to work on Mass Effect, and he's never worked at Bioware before. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about people that have contributed to a studio that's just not even remotely close to being as good as what they used to be. And I say that, I guess that's a subjective thing, but I also think in a lot of ways it's objective. I think you look at this team and you tell me they're as good as they were, and I've said it over and over again. Remember when the Veilguard came out and you had journalists jumping through freaking hoops for them saying that this is the return of Bioware, this is the best Bioware thing since Mass Effect 2? Unbelievable how much of a lie I think that was, and just journalists going way too crazy over it. But I mean, that really comes back to haunt them now. It wasn't that. It really wasn't all that good of a game at all. And even if it was a fine game to some people, I think there are some people that like it. That's fine. That's cool. But generally, you cannot tell me that BioWare is as good as they once were. They've put out products. I mean, they really haven't put out a lot of products, and some of them have been the biggest failures you've ever seen, and some of them have been whatever. And I would say Dragon Age, kind of whatever, right? Like, you might like it, you might not like it. It never sold. I don't think you could say maybe it's not the worst game of all time. It's certainly not the best. It just kind of falls in this category that's actually very bad because it's BioWare, right? Like, you don't want a 5 out of 10 type game when you're BioWare. You're supposed to be better than that. So again, I say all this stuff, but I try to say it with respect. Like, if I had it my way, I give them one more chance. I think I've been saying that for a year. You can go back and watch all my other videos. I've been saying you give them one final chance. And I mean, I know there was some overlap with Dragon Age, but not everybody, right? Everybody you got left, you throw onto Mass Effect, and you give us the best possible game you're capable of. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a good Mass Effect game, but you give it your all. And in terms of, like, if I was in charge, or even this situation, like with EA doing this, I let them have one final chance, and the game cannot come out 6 years from now. The game's got to come out in like 2 or 3. So maybe you rush them. And I think that's also kind of a byproduct of, well, what in God's name have you been doing this entire time? And maybe that was past management. Maybe that's management now. Find new management, okay? You got to get the game out in the next couple years. That's number one. That's probably the most important. And then the second most important thing is that it's got to be as good as humanly possible. And then you got to let it kind of speak for itself, right? If it's a phenomenal Mass Effect game, it's going to sell. And in a lot of ways, I think that could save BioWare. If it's a very bad Mass Effect game, you're going to have people so mad at you, you can't believe it, just like you did with Dragon Age, and you're done. You're like, literally, the studio will be done. So, look, this is a prime studio, and I think I've talked about it before. Like, when I wake up sometimes, and I think, one of these days, I'm going to wake up to Telltale being shut down again, a second time, which is insane that we have had to do this twice. But I've joked about that, but again, I mean, so jokes are kind of rooted sometimes in seriousness. Like, when Monolith closed for Wonder Woman, there was a lot of me that was like, yeah, I kind of, like, not that I was rooting for it because my heart was broken. You can watch videos of me talking about that, but that was also kind of a studio that you could feel like, there's a couple studios that if they announced tomorrow that they were closing, you might be sad. We'd have videos discussing legacy and all this stuff, right? Retrospectives, and that's fine. But you would also kind of get it. You'd also kind of say, well, like, I feel bad for those people, but like, it almost they had it coming, or there was enough signs to indicate that this seemed pretty likely. And I would say, like Telltale, right? If they shut down tomorrow, who would be shocked? Raise your hand. Nobody. I don't think a single person would be shocked. That doesn't mean we're rooting for it. It just means they've done all the wrong things to get to this point, and it very likely could happen. And it's the same thing here. You know, I think Telltale is probably, for me personally, my number one that I would be so sad about, but also not shocked in the slightest. Number 2 would be Bioware. Again, sad in a way. There'd be, again, like that kind of legacy remembrance kind of thing going on. But would I be shocked about it? Absolutely. Now, the shock would wear off after a quarter of a second when I would say, okay, well, here's 10 reasons why we got to this point, right? So, you know, again, to the people that are maybe freaking out inside Bioware, look, you just got to do the best you can. I'm not saying, you can't wish for a miracle. I mean, you have to, just band together and do the best you can. I guess that last comment, right? You just keep working. As long as you're there, as long as you get paid, as long as, the studio's doors aren't locked when you walk in tomorrow, you keep working on Mass Effect and you give it all you got. And that's all we can ask for. And then, of course, the game has to come out and it actually has to be good. You can't, giving it all you got and then the game being bad, not good enough, okay, to be honest with you. And that's kind of what got them in this situation probably in the first place. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.